Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis news from February 6th to the 12th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with, as I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with this update out of New Mexico. MJ Biz Daily brings us this news. Cannabis sales in New Mexico total $40.2 million in January. And as we saw, they are exceeding expectations last year overall since launching in April until the end of 2022. They're happy to see January is picking up on the right foot, as sales of regulated rec and med cannabis totaled $40.2 million in Jan. Data from the state's cannabis regulator shows that the monthly total includes roughly $26.5 million in adult use sales and $13.8 million in medical cannabis sales. And so for a bit more information, if you want to pause to read about the breakdown of New Mexico sales for January, but happy to see sales continuing to be strong there. While we move over to new cannabis ventures, American cannabis sales lift 5% in December, which we do like to see as it follows the trend we've been paying attention to, as typically 3 times in a year we see sales spike. The first is in March and April as people prepare for the 420 holiday. The second time is in July when the weather's beautiful, people are out and about and voting for legal cannabis with their dollars, and then in December as people prepare for the holidays. So you can pause to read or grab the link below to read anything that I might skip, but Eastern markets, just to recap, BDSA provides coverage for Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In December, year-over-year growth ranged from negative 11.6% in Maryland to plus 32% in Michigan. Keep in mind Maryland's medical only, and that's year over year, so not sequentially. But note that Florida, Maryland, and Pennsylvania are medical only markets, though Maryland is introducing adult use July 1st, 2023, I believe. And so you can pause to read for a bit more info, but just going to show the chart here and let you do the rest. But good to see Florida, of course, sales jumping back up. Illinois as well, record December for them. And the nice thing is that every Eastern market did see that jump back up in December. So Maryland as well, you can pause to read. Massachusetts, you can pause to read. Michigan, you can pause to read, and then Pennsylvania, you can pause to read as well. So on to Western markets, BDSA provides coverage for Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon. And one noticeable thing was that it was some of these Western markets, the more mature ones, where we didn't actually see them jump back up in December. So in December, year-over-year growth range from negative 22.2% in California to negative 6.4% in Arizona compared to a year ago. So you can pause to read for a bit more on Arizona. Would have liked to see that jump be a bit higher, but we don't know necessarily what's going on with Croptober on the West Coast. These markets are a lot more affected, I think, than the East Coast, especially just during these months. But anyways, I digress. California, you can pause to read. Many factors contributing to all of this. Colorado, you can pause to read as well. Most mature market in the country, at least they saw the jump back up, though. That's nice to see. Nevada, struggling more than any of the others, but you can pause to read for them. And then Oregon, chugging along, but good to see that jump back up in December. So just wanted to recap, sales are fairly strong across the board, or at least in December, as we were anticipating. And so with that, The Hill. And while it is an opinion piece, I just want to give credit to Paul Armentano for asking this question and using The Hill. And while The Hill does not necessarily agree with the views of the writer who wrote this, at least they're willing to publicize it, because more media outlets should be asking this question. Hey, Biden, what happened to the cannabis pardons you promised? And so not going to go through this whole thing, because we know that a lot of what he did in October was for show, and he hasn't actually acted on it, because the truth is, yet despite this congratulatory brouhaha, there remains an inconvenient truth. None of the 6,557 Americans identified by the U.S. Sentencing Commission as being eligible for presidential pardons have received them yet. Troubling, some 3 months following Biden's pronouncement, the Justice Department's website specifies the application for certificate of pardon for simple possession of cannabis is not yet available. So again, we're seeing the Biden admin fail the American people and not keep their promises, not do their job, and not let things go along quickly so that Americans can get their lives back. So very unfortunate, but thank you, The Hill, for at least asking this question, because it's definitely valid and stands. And so with that, just wanted to share some news on the interstate commerce situation. It's not something that I know a whole lot about, but I just want to share it because it is cannabis related. And so from my understanding, Logic Prevails did share this update from the Washington State cannabis residency requirement upheld by a federal court. And so we've seen 2 cases, essentially, one in Maine, I believe, and one in Washington State, where the federal court has ruled with different outcomes. So again, is that more reason where we might see something come through where federal cannabis prohibition being completely unconstitutional? I mean, we should have seen that a long time ago. But just to recap, rough couple of weeks for the interstate commerce is imminent crowd, or for any of people that believe that interstate commerce is coming soon. I do think that if cannabis were to be descheduled, then interstate commerce can happen right away. Obviously, that would be a big plot twist, and there would be a lot of shuffling and rearranging and whatnot, but just to highlight, a federal judge in Washington state ruled that the U.S. Constitution's dormant commerce clause doesn't apply because cannabis is still federally legal. So just a bit more on the topic here. Now, there might be a lot that I'm missing in this just because this is not sort of my forte and I don't spend a lot of time learning about the interstate commerce thing because I just don't believe it's very imminent. But if I'm missing anything out of this that's worth noting, please do let me know in the comments. So just wanted to share this to highlight what Logic Prevails points out as it is a different ruling than what we saw in Maine. And so with that, just wanted to share this little snippet from Mark Hauser. Although the Dormant Commerce Clause challenged the state cannabis laws is strong from a theoretical perspective, the Fed court in Washington just reminded us that theory and reality in cannabis are two very different things. And so from my understanding, and again, I could be wrong, but just trying to share, as much of a coherent story across the board. But Mark Hauser highlights why, the ruling in Washington is different from what we saw in Maine originally. The short version is that, one, according to Washington judges, there's no interstate market for cannabis because it's illegal, and two, the Controlled Substances Act is Congress's intent to regulate cannabis, so the Dormant Commerce Clause doesn't apply. As again on number 2, is in direct opposition to the First Circuit Maine case. So this is what I find the most interesting. If Maine and Washington are coming up with two different answers, at some point do they not have to rectify the big contradiction, or what's the word, not contradiction, but discrepancy at the federal level? Obviously, we would like them to do it. Obviously, 91% of Americans agree that it's time for them to do it. Because that's what I find noteworthy, but do let me know in the description if you know more about this situation or if I've missed anything. And any links featured in the last two will be in the description if you wanted to read through for yourself as well. On to this one from Merida Capital Holdings. Just a friendly reminder that Canopy Growth Corp will do less cannabis revenue in 2023 combined than Trulieve or Cureleaf or Cresco Labs will do this quarter most likely, especially when you convert Canadian to American dollars. And Tilray is a hemp granola beer company. Unfortunately, that has become the reality. Never would have dreamed it. And so as we said in 2017 when it went wreck, whoa, Canada. And so just wanted to share this interesting snippet from Merida Capital. Seems there's a bit more. Here's the piece. We think we nailed it against consensus. It seems like it was written 4 years ago, but sort of an interesting time capsule if you want to view it in that way. But with that, just wanted to share a bit of a laugh as we see Canopy Growth report their third quarter fiscal year 2023 financial results and announces Canadian business transformation plan. And so you can pause to read the highlights, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I'm not invested or interested in Canopy at all. Otherwise, if you are, you can grab the link below. Definitely proceed with caution. But to highlight their progress or lack thereof, third quarter fiscal 2023 financial summary, in millions of Canadian dollars, nonetheless, not even US dollars reported, compared to last year at this time, Q3 full year 2022, net revenue of just 101.2 million Canadian dollars. Down 28% year over year. Gross margin percentage, -2. How can it be so bad? Down 900 basis points. Adjusted gross margin percentage, 1%, down 1,200 basis points. Net loss of 266.7 million, which is 131% worse than what they did last year at this time. While their adjusted EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, another indicator that as time goes on, I believe in less and less, but -87.5 million, which is 30% worse than they did last year at this time, while free cash flow came in at -145.8 million. So they still burned 145.8 million, but this is a 13% improvement from what they burned last year at this time as well. So strictly using this to highlight the difference between US MSOs and Canadian licensed producers, and how the U.S. market is very different from the Canadian market, has a lot more potential for growth. And while, again, the share prices on the scoreboard have not reflected this, that's at least my thesis and what I believe and why I've put my money where my mouth is. But again, this is just my opinion, not advice. But if you do return to this channel, it's likely because you also see that that will happen at some point in time. And so, Weed Street 420, thank you for adding this on the Canopy development, as obviously Canopy gave us a lot of hope in the past that we would see safe banking pass or any of this because of their lobbying efforts, or their claims that they're proactively working with the Nasdaq and the Toronto Stock Exchange so that sooner than later it will facilitate the uplisting of a lot of these unfortunately discriminated against companies so they can get more liquidity from institutions and people can invest easier. Now, in hindsight, seems like a lot of those claims were bullshit as well. But so this is a question from Matthew Baker, posed to CEO of Canopy Growth, David Klein, yesterday on their earnings call, I believe. Nasdaq has made it clear that they'll delist if you have to consolidate U.S. assets. And so what is the answer? More bullshit. At least my bullshit indicator seems like it's gotten stronger after all this time. We're now working on alternatives which would solve the concerns, meaning we wouldn't have to consolidate Canopy USA into our results. Yeah, right. Not going to hold my breath for this, but just wanted to share because I did find that interesting. And last little bit of snippets from investment firms or anything that I found interesting. Jesse Redmond, some of the smart money is shifting to the credit side of cannabis. They see the potential for 15+% rates with warrant coverage. Again, straight criminal without safe, especially without safe. Cannabis businesses need capital and funds businesses are being formed to fill void. Obviously, it's not criminal because they can do this if that's what the environment allows, since Congress doesn't do their damn job. But in response to that, found this commentary from Viridian's note yesterday interesting as well. And so just if you wanted to read, more indications of stress, distress appear in the market. different context and different information you might not normally take in, but you might learn something from it. So just thought I'd share it. So with that, on to MSOs. Trulieve Cannabis Corp. to hold fourth quarter and full year 2022 results conference call on March 1st, 2023. And so we will see how has Trulieve cleaned up the harvest mess that they ended up buying. We'll obviously be finding out, but they're going to be holding this 8:30 a.m. Eastern time following the release of its fourth quarter full year 2022 results. With that, Green Thumb Industries publishes their inaugural social impact report. And so again, as time goes on and the more I learn, the less happy I am to see MSOs resorting to the mainstream sort of ESG and trying to focus on all this undercover Marxist crap, but at the same time also happy to see Green Thumb putting their money where their mouth is and giving back and actually helping versus all these other corporations that just virtue signal. And so again, not going to spend too much time, don't want to make these videos too long, but since 2021, Green Thumb has given more than $3.5 million to organizations nationwide through grants, retail giving programs, cannabis education scholarships, and efforts to increase voter participation in support of cannabis policy reform. And so this, nonetheless, I see as a good thing. Love to see Green Thumb and MSOs giving back, because they're giving back way more and helping repair the harms caused by the war on drugs than any government, regardless of what they're claiming. Other highlights from Green Thumb's social impact report include, so more on this if you want to grab the link below. With that, Air Wellness announces agreement to sell Arizona assets and option to acquire Ohio dispensary licenses. So this is very interesting. I mean, obviously Air Wellness just didn't need to make this agreement to purchase, and they wouldn't have lost money in the sense, but let's dig in a little bit. Has signed a definitive agreement to sell Blue Camo LLC, which comprises the company's Arizona assets, to AZ Goat LLC, or the buyer, a group consisting primarily of the former owners of Blue Camo, who sold the business to Air in Q1 2021. So truthfully, as an Air Wellness shareholder, I'm more impressed at how these investors got their assets back than I'm upset or bothered that Air tried to, overpay. But regardless, it is what it is. I don't think this is going to be the end of Air, and at least they're getting some cash back that will help their balance sheet in hopes of, continuing to do what they're doing, expanding, and then allowing, growth in new markets to offset so that they can survive in the long run, which I do believe will happen. That's why I'm investing in them. Obviously, I could be wrong. Only time will tell. But the sale includes 3 Oasis branded dispensaries in the greater Phoenix area, a 10,000 square foot cultivation and processing facility in Chandler, an 80,000 square foot cultivation facility in Phoenix, a lot of cultivation too, and Wilcox OC LLC, a joint venture developing an outdoor cultivation facility. And so you can pause to read for a bit more about what Air is getting back. Main thing though, when Air acquired Blue Camo in Q1 of 2021, total purchase consideration includes approximately $9.5 million in cash, and then 4.6 million Air shares, which at the time would have had to been valued at about 120 or 25 million, and they would have obviously had to sold it then in order to get that cash. And then 22.5 million in net adjusted seller notes. So I do believe that's debt as well. So just wanted to share this, as obviously it is true. This is what Air attempted to buy, and now they're going back on it. But so this is, from my understanding, the breakdown that Young Justin found of the cash at the time, the debt payable, and then 4.5 million shares, roughly 125, and then a contingent consideration of 117 million. But maybe they don't have to pay that since it didn't end up going through. I'm not too sure. But just relaying the news that came through the Bloomberg terminal as well. And so with that, take from it what you will. Again, just wanting to show what's true, and then a bit of a bear case, as I'm not trying to give so much hopium and make us all believe that this is coming sooner than later. I'm just trying to give as much of a relevant and coherent story of the development of this industry through time. So pause to read if you're interested in what Justin has to say. A little bit more on here. Good people asking questions or chiming in with their 2 cents. But yeah, big shout out to this guy down here, because this is the funniest thing. Selling to the original Blue Camo owners, laugh my ass off. These guys sold their shit, made a killing, and bought it back at a fraction of the price. Very impressive. And so moving along, also sharing this one from Logic Prevails. Update, Scott's Miracle-Gro not rolling over, as TerraSen is named as a defendant, along with JW and JW Asset Management, Jason Wild, against claims of violations of federal antitrust law. And so I haven't looked into this one too much either. Don't know a whole lot about it, but wanted to share it because it is happening. You can pause to read for more details. Otherwise, the links will be below in the description if you're interested in this specific story at all. But nonetheless, a bit more info, as apparently defendants thus sought to leverage defendant Jason Wild Asset Management's position in Riv Capital to stop the Etain deal. And while I don't know much about this, all I do know is if I bought an asset in New York a few years back, and I know now that I overpaid, and I've seen the situation in New York, I would be doing everything in my best interest legally in order to stop that deal from going through, because it's going to take a very long time to see any return on your investment based on the current situation. Now, again, doesn't mean that it won't happen ever, but it could take a very long time. Source down here will be in the description if you wanted to read through it. But moving back to state news, as Office of Medical Cannabis Use, this comes out of Florida, looking at the dispensary locations that were approved by the department for this past week from February 6th to the 10th. We've got Air Cannabis Dispensary, one new dispensary in Lake Mary, House of Platinum Cannabis in Clearwater, Move in Orlando, Move backed by Verano, and then Sunnyside in Daytona Beach, and Sunnyside is backed by Cresco Labs. And so interestingly enough, this is the first time ever week over week I've seen a decrease as the qualified patient count went down by 119 patients. So yeah, we lost 119, first time I've ever seen that. Maybe they're, ironing out crinks in their system, but so this showed that they're at 788,633. So unfortunate, but we'll have to look out week over week to see if this continues. It'd obviously be more call for concern if this happens consistently week over week, but worth sharing. And so with that, dispensations for February 3rd to the 9th, we've got all the MSOs that actively operate in Florida. We've got the number of dispensing locations that they have in operation, plus the number of milligrams of THC sold this past week, the milligrams of CBD sold, and the ounces of smokable flower. So great way to keep up with companies and their progress being made in Florida. And with that, you don't have to keep tabs on it or try and make a spreadsheet, because fortunately Pure Gilles does this for us already. So this is the Florida flower market share comp sheet. So looking at the ounces of smokable flower, Trulieve seems to have the most market share there. Cureleaf number 2, Move backed by Verano is number 3, Air Cannabis Dispensary number 4, and then Certera Wellness number 5, Grow Healthy 6, Fluent 7, and Sunnyside number 8. And then if we take a look at the Florida THC market share, so this is number of THC sold, we see that Trulieve is number 1, Air Wellness back up at number 2, Cureleaf number 3, Move number 4, Certera Wellness number 5, and then Fluent, Grow Healthy, and Viridian as well. And so with that, New Jersey apparently eliminates their cannabis cultivation license cap. So one way that you can expand legal sales is by obviously not putting a cap on how much cannabis can be produced, so you can properly supply, which helps directly offset the black market. So it's a win-win for everybody. But in a bid to boost a sagging adult use cannabis market and encourage minority participation, well, yeah, your sagging market is because you don't open enough stores for the 8 million people in your state. 17 is not going to supply them properly, so sure, the black market is still going to run rampant. And then encourage minority participation because Schmuck, Schumer, and Booker did not pass the Safe Banking Act, so they fucked over so many people in New York, New Jersey, and across the state, especially those that they got votes for. But the good news is New Jersey regulators are getting their heads slowly but surely out of their asses and abolish the state's cultivation license cap. As New Jersey's legalization law capped the number of large cultivation licenses at 37 for an initial 2-year period, but that restriction expires after February 2022, which we love to see. They should use the same logic with stores, because the more legal outlets for the 8 million people in New Jersey, as opposed to 17, you're obviously going to make way more money and you're going to be rolling in the dough. But funny enough, to date, only 17 cultivation facilities have opened in New Jersey, according to the CRC, and that's the fewest among 15 other states surveyed by the agency. The state would need nearly 850 more to meet the national average. So plenty of room for growth, but good to see New Jersey getting their heads out of their butts and making, good common sense decisions. And so this one from MJ Biz Daily: out of 2 states we might not expect it, lawmakers in Arkansas and Kansas this week introduced bills to legalize adult use and med, not just med, as well. So respectively, good to see this out of 2 places. Lawmakers in Arkansas and Kansas this week introduced bills to legalize adult use and medical respectively. And so while these bills have been introduced, no progress yet, but I will, of course, touch on them when these bills make progress. If they do, that would be great. Keep our fingers crossed. While this one comes out of High Times, Oregon cannabis industry in weakest economic position since launch in 2016, as apparently supply continues to sharply outpace the demand in Oregon. Could be many reasons, but the main one is Croptober and the fact that it seems like you might as well be an illegal grower this day and age because you face less hoops and regulations to go through, and the consequences if you get caught is just a fine or a slap on the wrist that you can afford because of all the money that you're going illegally. Again, I'm not trying to encourage this, but I understand why they do it. And so I'm not going to spend too much time going through this, but there was a new report apparently out of Oregon. And so if you're interested, obviously as a mature market, might be worth going through. I will put the link in the description. Fortunately, Oregon is one of the more mature markets in the country, so we can use it as a blueprint for what works and what doesn't work. But I just wanted to point out, because this irks me, they highlight after a banner sales year in 2020 with no context, stimulus checks alone. If it wasn't for stimulus checks, that would not be the case. And sadly, we're dealing with the consequences of 40% of the US dollars being printed in circulation now in 2020, and we're all suffering from the hidden tax that is inflation. And so nonetheless, they chalk it up to the combination of overabundant supply because there's lack of consequences for growing illegally, and then the fading demand because illegal is so abundant, it's much cheaper. But again, they just highlight down here, overall consumer demand since 2021 has been lower rate than prior years. Yeah, because there's no free money handed out. Now no one has any money. So nonetheless, grab the link below if you wanted to read through, but just wanted to pick that apart a little bit and share my 2 cents. But this out of Canada, legal cannabis industry launches major class action lawsuit against big Canada banks. So love to see this. Just going to touch on it a little bit, and we'll come back to it once we have a bit more info. But the plaintiff alleges that the banks have discriminated against actors in the legal cannabis business by suddenly closing current bank accounts, sounds like the US, or denying opening accounts and denying access to financial tools and services such as mortgage loans and credit lines. And so, was the legalization movement by governments actually just a ploy to try and control people with banks. I don't know, but it almost looks like it more as the days go on too. And so the lawsuit was launched on February 7th on behalf of Gabriel Boulanger, founder of Beauce-based cannabis microprocessing company Origami Extraction Inc., entitles entities targeted include the Desjardins Federation, National Bank, Royal Bank, Bank of Montreal, TD Bank, and CIBC, the big banks in Canada, essentially. So that's very interesting. We'll see how that goes along over time. And so Leafly, sharing this new study, says weed doesn't cause a hangover. We've known that for a long time, but that is a basis for questioning drug tests on workers and why we ought to just end that so truck drivers can do whatever they want to do in the evening so they can wake up the next morning, do their job, and make sure shit gets across the country so that people have their stuff. And so new study says there's little evidence that people experience a hangover or effects the day after consuming weed. The findings call into question employer policies on testing workers for drugs, raising the question, if workers don't experience lingering effects of THC, why should employers care what workers do the night before shift? And especially because cannabis and alcohol are not the same, and one is a lot better for the human body than the others. And so I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but just figured I'd bring you to parts where you can pause to read. So new paper, though, I will put that link right in the description. So you can pause to read a little bit, and then I'll bring it down here, pause to read a little bit more. Otherwise, grab the link in the description. But I also found this interesting study from the National Library of Medicine. And, I don't want to be biased to only try and highlight the positive medical benefits. I want to highlight what potential negative benefits there could be as well, and maybe laugh at them because I don't think it's necessarily a very valid study. But nonetheless, chronic delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol exposure impacts testicular volume and male reproductive health in rhesus macaque monkeys. So not in human beings, but in rhesus macaques. So while this is a study that was published in the National Library of Medicine and it was published in 2022, the reality is that they tested this on rhesus monkeys and not human beings. And so until they deschedule cannabis and test this on human beings, I don't give a shit, because all the anecdotal evidence that I've gathered using my eyes and fingers tell me that this is bullshit. And I imagine for many of you gentlemen, you agree that it's the same. And so if we pick this apart a little bit, the Design Research Animal Study, adult male rhesus macaques, they use 6 monkeys. So again, a very small sample size, doesn't tell us a whole lot. So obviously you can read main outcome measures, results, but I don't take it too seriously because these are again monkeys and not humans. And of course our DNA is close and this could be the same thing, but we are not the same. In rhesus macaques, chronic THC exposure resulted in significant dose response testicular atrophy, increased gonadotropins, and decreased serum sex steroids, suggestive of primary testicular failure. Further studies are needed to determine if reversal of these observed adverse effects would occur if THC was discontinued, and for validation of findings in a human cohort. Of course, that's the most important thing, and they try and put the keyword under male reproductive health of macaque monkeys and not human beings. And so regardless, I have not had kids myself, and if this is true and I find out in time, I guess I will suffer the consequences, but I know many people that smoke a lot of cannabis and have kids, especially in their 30s, but that's just my 2 cents. So what do you think of this very interesting study? And if you wanted to read through it, you can grab the link below in the description. So last 2 stories with that, wanted to share this from MJ Stock Trader, who just poses the question, thoughts after paper or plastic wrote this. Now again, I'm not saying I agree with this person because I'm still invested in the MSOs. I'm not giving up. This is my niche. There's no other niche for me. I'm gonna have to make this one work before I can branch out into another one. But Paper or Plastic says, been invested in MSO since 2019, been realistic and critical of the investment, but always optimistic. He adds, I'm officially struggling to see the bull case for MSOs anymore. The narratives the thesis were built on have deteriorated rapidly. And he's not wrong, but I'd say that's one of the narratives or thesis, that Congress wasn't corrupt and that they might work for the will of the American people. Sadly, they've proven that they don't do that. Big Pharma's lobbied them a lot to do nothing, and that's why they've done nothing. But the other thesis I would say is that cannabis itself is the medicine, and it's so good that you can't stop it. It's leading the charge through the states. And obviously, I think the last option we really have is descheduling or rescheduling. And Eason, thank you for sharing your 2 cents. Biden rescheduling cannabis is really the only thing that can happen to boom the cannabis industry. I believe he will do it in the next 16 months. As he said multiple times, he would decriminalize cannabis, and that is what it is, moving it to a Schedule 3 or something. Obviously, we want it descheduled. An incremental step in the meantime could be beneficial for us investors and allow us to reap some profits in the meantime. But obviously, we want the best thing for all Americans and for humans to get the plant back. And so just sharing this, what do you think? Let me know in the comments if you want to add to this or if you think this thesis has changed or not. But last bit to share, MJ Stock Trader, this is from yesterday, Cannabis Stock Talk. Cannabis bull case, 7 of 10 largest U.S. states by population haven't even flipped to adult use yet, which is true. Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, New Jersey, number 11 just started, and Virginia in 2024, number 12, makes it 9 of the top 12 states. So again, we're still very early. I have not listened to this yet, but I've got a busy day ahead. I want to try to listen to this tonight, but figured I would add it because Elise Lawrence said thank you for sharing, and there are some interesting points made. And so that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.